Darklings. So today I am doing another director spotlight, this time on Peter Jackson. So he was born on Halloween in 1961 in a rural coastline town in New Zealand. And his first feature took 4 years to make, which was Bad Taste from 1987. This film is definitely in bad taste and not exactly what I call a fun watch, mostly because of the extreme level of low budget, courtesy of him and his friends working on it on weekends with whatever cash they could come up with. It's ridiculous, it's weird, it's gross, as is his second feature, Meet the Feebles from 1988, which was one of those really unpleasant movies that I kind of felt like I needed a shower after watching. I don't necessarily recommend it, but if you want to investigate it for yourself, that is up to you. His third film also kind of goes into that weird splatterpunk type of aesthetic, which is Dead Alive or Brain Dead, depends, it goes between those two titles, which I know a lot of people rather like it. It is definitely a cult film from 1992, but it isn't really my favorite. It kind of has a bit of the spirit of Evil Dead in it, in the sense that there is a lot of very creative, humorous gore effect, but there's also a lot of gross out effect I don't find terribly fun to watch. I was like, this is a little too gross for me. Maybe I'm just too much of, I don't know, a girl for it. But it's definitely worth watching at least once if you're into splatter films at all. It's funny, but it is weird. He does a bit of a departure from his splattery roots for 1994's Heavenly Creatures, which is based off of a true story of two girls that conspire to murder their parents. It's a very peculiar little drama with a very young Kate Winslet before Titanic. It's definitely worth watching. It is a very good film. I don't remember it terribly well. It's been a long time since I've seen it, but it is a more subtle film than his previous entries. After that, Forgotten Silver is a TV movie from 1995 that I haven't seen, so I don't know anything about it. And then after that is The Frighteners, which I actually do have a DVD copy of, with Michael J. Fox. This one is a really surprising movie in a lot of ways. It doesn't really fit with what was popular at the time of its release in 1996, but it has a bit of humor, it has a bit of scare, it has a bit of I don't know, heartwarming moments. It's kind of a fun, weird mystery in which a guy who's a bit of a hack but can't actually see and talk to spirits has to solve a mystery. The ghost effects are weird. It's all kind of zany fun, but this is a weird film to come from the guy who then later went on to direct The Lord of the Rings, a multi-Academy Award winning, very expensive franchise that ran from 2001 to 2003, because sometimes I look at his earlier films and think, how did they pick this guy to do this? Something that was considered largely unfilmable in a lot of ways. And I watch every New Year's director's cut marathon while working on sewing projects. I haven't actually had the chance to finish reading the books. I read The Hobbit and Fellowship and never quite got around to reading Two Towers and Return of the King, but I will eventually. But these are beautifully executed and fascinating films, especially for their very extreme runtime. They definitely have their own cult standing for a reason and have those Academy Awards as well for a reason. Then there's also his rather mixed reviewed remake of King Kong. This is pretty much the third attempt at doing this film. I haven't seen the one from the 70s, but it features a segment that was kind of lost from the original 1930s film, which features giant bugs, which when I saw this movie when it came out when I was 12 really did kind of freak me out because they're very unpleasant. It's not a great film, but I do enjoy it despite its long runtime and Jack Black's rather odd turn as the director character. But this was what introduced me to Adrian Brody, of all things. Again, I'm showing my age. But his filmography kind of throws me off constantly. In 2009, he did a film adaptation of The Lovely Bones, which was a book that traumatized me in middle school when I read it at the same age as the main character, Susie Salmon, when I was 14. The book is definitely darker than the already dark tone of the film, but the film does kind of capture some of the sense of time and everything. I don't really know how to describe it. I did like the film, but the book I read at a very odd age for it, so I kind of warped my perception of the film, especially as seeing it as an adult. I didn't see it until a few months ago. But it's an interesting film and an interesting concept. Anyway, after that, from 2012 to 2014, he did work on the Hobbit films, which, while I do get a kick out of them, having recently done a director's cut marathon in 2 days of the Hobbit films and the Lord of the Rings films, they do not hold up as well as the Lord of the Rings, probably because they rely too heavily on digital effects, especially for the orcs. There are no orcs that are just men in costume, and so it does look worse. And they just pulled a lot of stuff out of their ass for for this. So this is unnecessarily long. That book is rather straightforward. But I do still appreciate the sense of adventure and the scenes with Sméagol and how Bilbo got the ring is still my favorite part of the book and of the films. But the fact that the guy who did splatterpunk films like Meet the Feebles and Bad Taste and Dead Alive did these very expensive, very extravagant films is still wild to me. I think it's hilarious in this own weird way. In 2018, he did a documentary called They Shall Not Grow Old that I don't really know anything about. But otherwise, Peter Jackson's film career is varied and strange, and I still have questions about it. But pretty much all of his films, with the exception of the first two, I have enjoyed, or at the very least appreciated. He does have a very good sense of scale and drama, especially in his films that actually have a budget. Anyway, hopefully you've seen one or all of these, and if you haven't, feel free to ask any questions, and if you have anything that is similar, feel free to make recommendations. Till next time, Darklings.